So here's the ground rules.
Okay.
Played at a course that is a par 70. 70 is the total par. 34 on the front 9, 36 on the back 9. However, I did not end up having time to play the par 5 18th. So really we're talking par 65 over 17 holes. A lot of times for people like me who don't play golf, if you talk about it becomes an accomplishment to break 100. If you can go below 100, double digits instead of triple, that's really something. Now, I again didn't play the final hole, which is a par 5. What do you think I scored over 17 holes on a par 70, which is really more like par 65?
We'll do 105.
You're very close.
Really?
I believe, and look, a lot of times when you say what your golf score was, people, they kind of kick the ball. Oh, that's a bad lie. Let's throw it over here. I genuinely tried not to do any of that, but there were a couple of times where I hit it in the water, and so I took a drop. I took the stroke associated with that drop, but maybe couldn't find the drop zone. So, okay, don't go further than your ball advanced, but drop it back here. Pretty casual round, but really tried to adhere to the rules. Ended up at 102.
Whoa, okay. Okay, player.
I know,
look at that.
What happened is I was just out solo. My wife went with me, riding in the cart. That was the plan. And they paired me in a foursome, basically. There were 3 guys that were going to play, and so I was their 4th. Didn't know them. They were nice guys, and I had to apologize up front. I'm like, I am sorry for when I hold you up. But they kept telling me, it's all good. By the way, stop running. You don't have to run. We're not going anywhere. I just hate to be that guy who's the worst golfer in a foursome, and I kind of felt like I certainly was. I mean, these guys were pretty solid. Had a few mishits as anybody would, but I was like, I just don't want to embarrass myself in front of strangers. So I was like, that's always me. I'm like Charlie Hustle, trying to make sure that nobody's going to have a problem with me. But yeah, man, I think playing in that environment sort of made me iron sharpens iron. I almost had to play better because I was going to be embarrassed to have too many mishits. But I did not have any. I'm looking at my scorecard. I did not have any double pars. Basically, all right, if it's a par 4, I didn't have any 8s on par 4s. My only 8 was on a par 5. So I was pretty typically triple bogey, double bogey for the most part. And I'm pretty sure I could have parred the par 5 18th. If I would have done that, I think that would have put me at a clean double bogey on every hole average, 36 over par.
Okay.
So I guess my score would actually have been 101. I'd have to go back and double check it, but it was over 100 by a little bit to where I was right on that pace a little bit of if you were to double it, I think I would have ended 106 on a par 70 would have been about my. So I that's not good, but I have no shame in it because most of my shots went in the air and toward the trajectory. It was kind of fun. Makes me want to play golf a little bit more.
Very, very casual, carefree. Love that.
It was. And the one dude, man, was so casual. He was in the foursome. He would skip a hole, didn't care, would get out. He was on the phone. Then he would just hit a nuke right after that. I was like, this guy is who I want to be when I grow up, but I think he's younger than me. So that I'm not going to be able to accomplish it. Just had the aura. I very much do not have aura on the golf course, but maybe someday I can acquire it by just learning to play better. It was a little bit disconcerting, though, that the other gentleman in the group was kind of giving me some tips because he could tell that I'm a little bit novice at this. I might have overplayed how novice I was just to make them think that I was really, really bad, to where when I was mediocrely bad, they wouldn't have been offended.
Yeah.
But he was kind of giving me some different tips. He said, really, to get better, you got to be playing twice a week. And I was like, yeah, I wish I could. I could.
I got bad news for you.
I don't think it's happening because it's just a lot. It costs money. It's a lot to do, but it is a lot of fun. So let us know your golf stories from the summer so far. There was golf talk on in politics land last night, too. Who would have known that was one of the more interesting things to come of the old debate? See, I told you I wasn't going to talk about it again, but there I go. All right.
Keep lying to me.
Here's something that was arguably even uglier on television last night than that. Cardinals lose 11-4 to the Reds. Miles Michaelis, what happened?
What the hell was that?
What he said. That's kind of how I felt, too.
That's how I felt looking at my phone, what the heck was that?
There are just some times where if you watch back to the highlights of Michaelis and the pitches that he gets beat on, some of them are well located, right? Sometimes you put one on the black, and a guy maybe knows it's coming, or he sees it well out of your hand, whatever the case, and he puts good wood on it. That's going to happen. What happens so often for Miles Michaelis, though, and it's frustrating, is the curveball. I'm not saying he's tipping pitches when I use this terminology, but it's almost like it's telegraphed. The breaking ball, the way it comes out of his hand, it spins up there in the zone, and you have all day and night to wait for it and just lock in on it as a hitter. There are some guys where we say, oh, he's got a deceptive delivery. I guess what I'm trying to say is that Miles Mikolas is not among those guys. Like when it looks like a fat one up there, it just has to be Christmas morning for the batters. It's not that he does it every outing. He's had some really good outings. I don't want to undersell that fact, but last night was not one of them. 4 1/3, 10 runs, 9 of them earned. You might say, I got a lot of people on YouTube and different places with comments like, well, why did Ollie Marmol leave him in for as long as he did? Look, when the game is the game at that point, Cardinals had the bases loaded in the first inning. They didn't cash in. Arenado hit a homer a couple innings later. So you're like, okay, we're within striking distance, but then Miles immediately gives back 2 or 3 runs. At that point, you just have to try to get him to 100 pitches and see how far he can go, because this game is probably going to turn out to be a wash. If it's a playoff game, it's different. But in June, with the rigors and the realities of what happens when a bullpen has the taxation on it that it does for these Cardinals, you're just going to have to accept your fate at some point and go, Miles, it's kind of up to you to get through 5 tonight, however you can manage to do it. Because after he failed to do so, they stretched him to 94 pitches. But even then, you used multiple innings of John King. Gio Gallegos had to record 5 outs. Like, those guys won't be available today. I get it. Bullpen pitchers are there to pitch. But that's one where I don't know what Ollie Marmol is supposed to do other than leave Miles out there to dry, because they're probably losing the game regardless at a certain point, and it doesn't spare anybody's feelings to lose 8-4 or 8-2 instead of 11-4 or 11-2. Cardinals actually scored a couple of runs late in order to ensure we did not get the Cardinals pitching debut of Brandon Crawford. He was warming up, ready to come in. My. But it's that new rule, or new within the last couple of years, you have to have an 8-run deficit, I want to say, in order to bring in a position player
to
not embarrass the sanctity of the game or whatever. So the Cardinals scored 2 runs to make it a 7-run deficit, and so Brandon Crawford was warmed up and everything. He pitched once with San Francisco. It was the only time before this year that he ever played a non-shortstop position in the big leagues, and now he's doing a little third base for the Cardinals. He is starting at shortstop tonight. But that was basically the terrain you were on late last night for the Cardinals. I don't have an issue with Ollie Marmol leaving Miles Mikolas in. Those bad starts will come around once in a blue moon. You hope to make them fewer and far between, but at that point, you just had to ride him. It just stinks that the Cardinals started off the series this way. Could have had some momentum after that series win over the Braves. Reds have come in slumping, and now you kind of let them off the hook, and they're ready to go for a full weekend. That's the bummer of it.
Yeah, it's really tough. It'd be one thing if it was just kind of like the Reds kind of just like snuck one out of there, if like a 3-2 or like a 1-0 or something like that, where it's like, oh yeah, this might be kind of fluky, and 11-4 I think is fluky too, but you never want to give the offense enough of a reason to feel like they can go out and win it, right? Especially for a team like the Reds that have been so like hot and cold throughout the season. It is really tough getting that kind of performance out of Mikolas after he's had, a fairly solid stretch, at least I thought, where he's been, putting together some quality outings and been a reason the Cardinals are kind of back in the spot where they are right now in the wild card race. I want to know, though, this is kind of like, well, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln, after the fact, but how'd you feel about Gallegos? Is this just kind of like the natural spot they're going to put him in now? Maybe not like this pronounced where it's like 11-2 or whatever, but is this just kind of like what he's doing?
Now.
Okay.
He's going to have to prove his way back in. What happened, it's interesting that he was able to come back a day after pitching his first stint on Wednesday. That game 1 of the doubleheader Wednesday, he pitched an inning. It didn't look good. Needed 26 pitches to get through it, but only gave up one, I think a walk. Didn't give up any hits, but it's like every count was 3-2. It was a grind, and then
it was taking a while.
And then that was a game that they were down big as well, game 1 on Wednesday to Atlanta. And as I understand it, Ollie was like, so hey, how about the 9th too, bud? Like, can you get us through, because we got 2 games to play today? And Gio said, well, lightheaded. I'm feeling kind of lightheaded. I don't think I can go. And that's like, buddy, man, this Cardinals team, like, the bullpen's been taxed. They could use, like, this is your role right now. You're not the setup man anymore to be able to kind of make those demands. Which, again, if you're lightheaded, if you're feeling sick, whatever, like, that's the thing. It's
we don't want you to keel over on the mound, right? When
don't want that.
When there's still game going.
That being said, don't make light of it. Pun. You just, man, it's frustrating. when you think, okay, this is the role that I need from this guy to be a multi-inning guy today, mop up some of these innings so that we don't, because look, Liberatore was to pitch game 2 on Wednesday, and he ended up going 6 innings and did a great job, but you didn't know going into that what you were going to get from him. So to have all hands on deck would have been nice. And they ended up having to use, I believe it was Ryan Fernandez that pitched the 9th of game 1. He's not a guy that you need to be pitching down 4. He's your leverage guy. So to waste him in that spot was a little bit annoying. So credit to Gio is my point to come at full circle here. Yesterday, to be able to go an inning and 2/3, a lot more efficient, 18 total pitches, did it on a back-to-back, so you can cross that off the list. It's going to take a while for me to really trust him back in those leverage spots for the Cardinals, but this was at least a step in the right direction. Coming off of a debut day, I'm going to call it debut, of him coming off the IL, coming off of a first glance that I didn't think was a very good look. Like, you have Chris Roycroft basically dominating the heart of the order in that game on Wednesday night in relief of Matthew Liberatore, just does exactly what they needed from him as the 27th man. And then you kind of compare that to what Gio did in game 1. You're like, man, if I had to pick from just today which guy I'd rather keep on the roster and which guy I'd rather send to Memphis tomorrow, rather have Roycroft. But Roycroft was the 27th man. He gets sent back down. Gio, though, did come up and do his job in that game last night. You got to have some guys who can eat some innings and mop things up, and he did so with effectiveness. So that's the way it works. You start down at the bottom of the totem pole if you're Gio at this point. He was the setup man. He was probably the go-to 8th inning guy at one point in time. It's not that way now, and I think he's going to need some time and a number of occasions of proving it before you can really reliably slot him back into that role. It hasn't happened after just 2 games, but last night was a step in the right direction. Maybe one of the only positives, Chris, you could take from the game. I will say, Arenado, getting him going is going to be so critical.
Yeah.
Him and Goldschmidt, man, it's been the story of the season for the Cardinals that those guys haven't really gone. Gorman had that just en fuego, unbelievable hot stretch. He hit 6 homers on one singular road trip, but outside of that, it's been pretty lean. He'll still bop one every now and again, but it's kind of empty calories, as I call it. He's hitting 190, OPSing, 690. He's not been that dude for the scope of the season. So that's why it's like you look at the dudes in the middle. The dudes in the middle need to be the dudes in the middle. That was the story earlier in the year, but now Ollie has sort of adjusted, which you have to, expectations on these guys because you're halfway through the season almost, and they haven't been performing. So it's gotten to the point where Arenado's batting 6th more often. You're seeing Goldie bump down a little bit. Gorman's bumped down to 7th usually. Like, that's the new norm that we're living in right now. Tonight, Mason Wynn is not your leadoff man because he's out of the action. They're going to give him a day, which is fine. He's going to have to take days off now and again, and we've seen better play from Brandon Crawford, so he gets to have the start at shortstop. That reorients your lineup to where Donovan's back up to the top. Interesting to see Wilson Contreras slide to number 2 in the lineup because you're going to go left, right, left, Burley number 3, and so on. So that's kind of an interesting wrinkle to this. But my point, and I mentioned it with Lars Nootbaar, he's going to start a rehab this weekend in Springfield. When you start to think about getting him back, and when you think about getting Tommy Edman back, which I would say right now, I'm going to say the same thing I said since March. Anything you get from him pre-All-Star break is a bonus. So if Edman shows up before the All-Star break, great. I'm going to say right after the All-Star break is probably when you get him back, because I think until he starts an assignment, which they said Newt is, I don't believe Edman is quite ready to do so yet, he's going to have to play rehab games for at least, I would think, a week. Like a full week of rehab games, which means 6 days, and then they're off Monday. I don't know if 6 games is going to be enough, but I really think it would behoove the Cardinals to just give him that runway. So that's going to maybe still be a little bit of time off from where we stand right now. But I think when you talk about getting these guys back, I laid it out in the top 5 at 5. Put them in whatever order you want, but generally I'm going to think that the Arenados, Goldies, and Gormans tier ends up being kind of your 5, 6, 7, or maybe at some point 6, 7, 8. I just don't know if you do that to the veterans, because that would mean one of Goldie Arenado is going to bat 7th. Maybe 5, 6, 7 is as low as you can get him, Chris, but you can start to kind of see it come together of a very balanced attack when healthy. Your righties, maybe in order, are Contreras. I don't know if I would then go Arenado or Goldie necessarily of who would be the name at that point. I know I'm forgetting a righty off the top of my head. Lefties, Burleson, Nootbaar. Now I really am blanking on the guys. I said Burleson.
Yeah.
Burleson, Nootbaar. Help me out here. Gorman,
yeah.
Mason Wynn was the other righty.
Yeah.
He's out of the lineup today. That's why I was blanking on him. So, like, now you're suddenly up to 7, 8 guys who are like, okay, Brendan Donovan, another lefty. That's like 8 dudes plus a center fielder, whether it's Siani or whether it's Tommy Edman coming off the IL, that ends up being formidable. I think that ends up being a lineup that can play as you go. And that's why when we talk about, well, what do the Cardinals need at the deadline? We're not really talking about got to make a splash with a bat. Because I look at this lineup and say, when healthy, I could see maybe what John Mozeliak sees is like, there's not a lot you have to do. You don't have to mess with it too much. Ask Ollie to put him in an order that makes sense. But I think 1 through 9, this offense has a chance to be still, I'm not going to go crazy with it, but top half, top 12 potentially when you get it fully intact. But the risk with that is, of course, that you get guys back and then more of them get hurt. That always tends to be a revolving door. So I can understand the disconnect there a little bit where Cardinals fans would say, they need pitching. You got to find a starter. You got to find a bullpen help, but you probably need a bat too. I just don't know when healthy where you put another bat. And I also, based on the timeline of some of these guys coming back, I'm not really sure there's going to be anywhere that John Mozeliak is going to really try to break the bank in terms of trade cost acquisitions to do something ahead of the July 31 deadline. But you can let us know your thoughts on the Cardinals and kind of where they're at. 875 KTGR. Chris, is that a fair way to characterize in your mind the offense, or do you feel like, no, you're on the side of some Cardinals fans that say, look, you can't count on health when health has not been presented to you all year. Go get us a bat. I can understand how people might think that way. I just don't know if I can personally wrap my head around how it would actually play out.
I'm also having some difficulties wrapping my head around how, splurging for like a big time bat or something would look like for the Cardinals if that's the way they want to go through the trade deadline. I do feel like you are kind of better off just rolling the dice with the players you have here. Like, I think they've got a lot of potential. I think that outfield's got a lot of potential. I feel like there still may be like a little bit more juice in like the Paul Goldschmidt, like the Nolan Arenado box. If you want to try to squeeze that a little bit more, I feel like it is possible for this Cardinals lineup to sort of make it all gel together. I think we're seeing more frequent flashes of that in the last couple of weeks than I think we have, in months prior. I would like to see some more of it though before I'm definitively like, yeah, we don't need to worry about, like an extra bat or something like that. But I do feel like at this point, this lineup has sort of acquitted itself from being like, yeah, we need to go out there and like spend big on like another bat to try to like make this thing work. I think they can make it work right now.
Yeah, and it's the guys like Mason Wynn that I would say, whatever your expectations were for him, mine were like B-League average offensively because I know you're going to be great on defense. And that was maybe not giving him enough credit for the way that throughout his career professionally, every time he hits a level, he maybe slumps a little bit at the beginning as he gets acclimated. But before long, you're going to see Mason Wynn take off. And I was like, yeah, if he can OPS 700, just be average, be Tommy Edman like offensively, and that can be enough. I think I probably undersold Mason Wynn. But his emergence as somebody that you put into the leadoff spot, and if he's not there, you're going, the lineup is missing him. That's notable. Alec Burleson going from fourth outfielder role player to definitive gotta be batting in the first inning for your offense the way that he's going right now. Like, those are the things that have allowed the Cardinals to, despite the things going on with the Arenados and the Goldies and having Wilson Contreras out for as long as he was and having Nolan Gorman slumping. I mean, he is ice cold right now outside of a stray homer here and there. Like, those are the sorts of things that have allowed the Cardinals to stay buoyed around the middle of the pack. I'm looking at it right now. Over the last 15 days, they're 718 OPS, which is right smack dab in the middle of the league, 15th in baseball. Over the last 7 days, however, last week for the Cardinals, 787 OPS, that's 9th in baseball. So they are performing at a level, I think producer Chris is right about that we're not panicking about the Cardinal offense anymore, but we still have questions on like, well, how good can it really be? Because you have to remember back to the beginning of the year, we talked as though this had to be the unit that would carry the team. Not like, if they're just good enough, the Cardinals can be decent. No, like they needed to be elite if you wanted to be a real divisional contender. And I think the story of the Cardinals' record to this point tells the story of the team that they've been. Because when you look at them offensively, it's like, all right, they haven't gotten that level of performance all year long. They're 18th right now in baseball for the full season in OPS. So they're creeping toward middle of the pack, but they're not quite there, not quite to that summit. It's pretty sad when the summit is middle of the pack, but that's how bad they were at the beginning of the year. They've really turned it around since like Mother's Day. They've got one of the best records in baseball. They've been pretty good, and I don't think we have to panic about them. But if you really want to talk about catching up to Milwaukee, they're still 6 or so games clear of St. Louis. That's where you have to enter into the conversation of like, all right, when can this offense really consistently be the force that we were kind of hoping it would be at the beginning of the year? Maybe that's when you get Newpar and Edman back. Maybe it's not even entirely fair to ask for that until then. but that's still the thing that I'm waiting to see go. And maybe I'll be waiting 6 months for it, and we'll be talking in October like, well, really wish the Cardinals offense would have gotten going because they missed the playoffs by a game. But hopefully that doesn't end up being the case. I think once they get some of these guys back, man, it's going to look pretty good. And even until then, like Michael Ciani, I like him out there every day because of his defense. Offensively, there's still a little bit to be desired, of course. He's batting ninth and for a reason. But a good defender that you're going to love to have as a weapon off the bench when the time comes to get some other guys back and healthy. So that's kind of where I am on the Cardinals right now. They'll go into tonight against the Reds at Busch Stadium. Andre Palante against Frankie Montas, the almost Cardinal. Seemed like he was another one of those guys that everybody said,
shoot, no kidding.
Trade for him, and then they didn't. And I think that was probably right, but now he's going to have a chance to say, no, it's not. We're going to shove on you down at Busch. In a series that for them, honestly, Producer Chris, for your Royals, might be more important than the one the Cardinals are facing. Look, you're playing the Reds. Try to split it. 4-game series. You lost the first one. See if you can win a couple over the next 3. Whatever. Cardinals are in an okay spot in the wild card chase. I'm more worried about the Royals right now than I am the Cardinals in terms of their ability to maintain their spot in the AL wild card structure and kind of keep those Gardos within striking distance because you don't want them to get too far ahead of you. You'd like that Central Division in the American League to still be a viable option for the Royals. But the Guardians have been playing so well, and so to be able to come in last night, Michael Wacha, second time pitching back off the IL, had a really nice start. Royals didn't score a bunch of runs because it's not really the way they're built. They're built to win with pitching. And last night they did exactly that. 2-1 win over the Guardians, gain a little bit of ground on them in the division, start off the long weekend on the right note. How are you feeling right now about your Royals after that one, Chris? Because that's the type of game that could have gone either way. It's a 2-1 win. It's a pitcher's duel. But the Royals get the timely hitting again in the 6th inning. They drive in a couple of runs to, again, come from behind. This isn't like a massive comeback, but you're down 1-0. You take a 2-1 lead, and then you see the bullpen taking you off into the sunset with 3 2/3 scoreless innings. How do you feel about that one? Had to be pretty good if you're a Royals fan last night.
Yeah, this really felt like a secret formula to success for the Royals that they just have not been seeing for the duration of this month, right? I mean, the last time they won a series, beyond like the Marlins series, was back in like the first weekend of June against the Mariners where they had that insane like 10-run comeback or whatever. Like, yeah, it really does feel like if we're going to exist in a reality where the Royals are not like stupid crazy, especially when runners are in scoring position, and they're kind of like, coming back down to earth a little bit, and maybe they're not cranking like, 5-run games like every single game. They are going to need to sort of like scrape and claw their way into like getting those runs. Like, I think they were fortunate in being able to get like insane production from Kyle Isbell and Miguel Garcia back to back with those triples, right? And then getting like a sac fly from Vinny P to like be the go ahead run. And then being able to trust your bullpen to just kind of like sit on that for, it was like 9 outs, right? If I'm doing the math correctly in my head. So, it's a pretty daunting task because, this is still a very serious Cleveland team, very serious lineup. And of course, the way the Royals bullpen has been, throughout the duration of the season, I think it's been kind of volatile. There are some dudes you can trust, I think, but overall it's a little bit of a mixed bag, at least versus like the starting rotation, which has been so super duper solid. I do feel like, this being like seeing something like that from Sam Long, it feels like, okay, now that you're in this position where you have to go maybe a little bit over what you usually are just because Michael Wacha didn't go the full 6, the fact that you're able to trust him in that spot and also get, pluses from guys like, James MacArthur, who is probably going to be like your go-to closer, especially in these tight games like that. The fact that you can trust these guys to lock it down while the Royals, figure out how to score like 2 or maybe like 3 runs to like get over the hump.
It's not pretty.
It's not pretty.
It's not a good amount of runs.
Yeah, but you're going to have to figure out, especially if you're, just holding the Guardians to 1 run the entire game. It does feel like this is like the opportunity for you to kind of like get back into it, maybe feel yourself a little bit. The fact that you can just be like, hey, we're just kind of scratching and clawing our way to like get these wins, but they're still wins. They will still show up on the board. It doesn't matter if you put up like 10 runs or whatever to make it happen. You're still getting those wins.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really what it boils down to. Like, when we talk about the Cardinals, they have to win in a certain way or it's not going to work. That's the way I view this season. And the pitching has been a little better than I think I anticipated. The offense has been quite a bit worse on the aggregate than I anticipated. They're better recently, but if you're counting the whole season and what they did at the beginning, disappointing. So this may not track entirely, but my thought coming into the year was, and maybe this is just true of every team, because if you looked at every team's record when they score 4 or more runs, you'd probably say, yeah, they win a lot of games. And when they score fewer than 4, they don't win as many games. But I thought it was particularly going to be true of the Cardinals, that they needed to be a team that You don't have to score 8 every day. You don't have to score 6 every day. But if you get to 4, I think you have a staff between the rotation and the bullpen that can hold opposing teams to 3 or hold them to 4 over 9, and then you take your shot in extra innings. That is basically the blueprint that I saw for the Cardinals. The Royals, I think, are completely different because their starting rotation is much better. It's I don't know if it's much deeper, but I think it probably is, especially with Michael Wacha being kind of their number 4 as of right now and pitching the way that he did last
middle,
night.
I think the Royals have the leg up.
They have if you want to go 1v1, Lugo versus Sonny Gray, I think it's probably a wash. I'm not going to tell you that Gray is better than Lugo. If anything, I think I'd give the edge to Lugo with the way that he's pitched this year. But I also know that there are very few guys I'm taking in the league over Sonny Gray. So I'm cool with the Cardinals ace. But then behind it, Royals number 2, whether it's going to be Singer or Reagans, you take your pick. I'm taking that guy from KC. Whether it's going to be the other, whoever you didn't take at number 2, I'm taking that guy at number 3 over whoever the Cardinals probably goes. Kyle Gibson 2, maybe Miles Michael is 3. And then if Lance Lynn is your 4, I'm probably taking Michael Wacha. And that was an option the Cardinals had, right? Like, former Cardinal, you could have done that exact thing. I would make the case, though, that I'm okay with the Cardinals going Lynn over Wacha. And again, I don't know how closely they considered Wacha. I'm going to say probably not very significantly. And I don't remember exactly what part of the offseason Wacha signed with the Royals, if it was early or late. But the Cardinals signed their guys early, and they went after, they had a type, right? They had a type that they really wanted to shore up for 2024. And part of that was durability, being able to be out there 30 starts. That's kind of been echoed by the front office, by the organization. Michael Wacha doesn't really fit that. Like, if you look at his number of innings, it just didn't vibe with what the Cardinals were looking for from their number 4, right? You can make the case that they signed an ace in Sonny Gray that's not an innings eater, but high-end upside, that's what they were after there. But they also said, look, we know that Sonny Gray has not been a guy that over the past decade has gone back-to-back innings eater type of seasons. They're going to be asking him to do that this summer because he went 184 last year. They're going to need 170, 180 from him this year. Just a full season is basically what they're hoping for. Michael Wacha, that's not really what you're generally getting over the course of his career. So the Cardinals basically had to get some beefy boys that could eat innings, and they felt like we're going to make 30 starts. That was arguably the most important characteristic of a number 4 starter for the Cardinals when they signed one. And Lance Lynn, I think, is, maybe they thought Gibson wouldn't be quite as good as he's been, but either Lynn or Gibson, they both archetype the same way to eat a bunch of innings. That's the 1 through 4, and I'm taking 3 of 4 Royals is basically what I said. And the only one that I'm not definitive on taking Royals is the first one, and I called that a tie. So 3-0-1 goes to KC in terms of, so that's the way they can afford to win games, is my point. They can win 2-1. They can win 3-1. They can win 3-2. That can be a more viable strategy for the Royals than I think it can be for other contending teams, and especially for the Cardinals. I just don't think the Cardinals win that way too often throughout 162. We've seen it at times, and they're fortunate that the pitching has been able to do it. But I think the Royals can get away with it more often than not. But what has to go along with that is a good bullpen. Sam Long, he's kind of come out of nowhere a little bit to be somebody that I think they can start to rely upon. I don't know about leverage, but there was leverage last night when you're within a run and then you take the lead and you're asking the guy to do a little bit of everything, be the bridge to the late inning guys. Those are the pieces in the bullpen that if they start to fall into place for Kansas City, that 3-2, 2-1 sort of archetype of a win can become even more viable. And I don't think you have to fear it. I don't think you have to run from it. If you're the Kansas City Royals, that can kind of work for you. And then maybe at some point the offense starts to vibe a little better. And instead of having 2 or 3 guys that could conceivably help you on a given night, you feel better about 6, 7, 8, 9 guys that can do it. I don't know how close they are to achieving that, Chris, but is that a fair take to say, well, I think this is a Royals team that can honestly afford to play more of those 1-0, 2-1, 3-1 type of games than other teams?
So it's interesting, especially because of, a lot of this is covered by how the season started, right? Where it just felt like no matter what, there would be at least 2 Royals players who could just hit the stripe off the ball. And there would usually be 1 or 2 dudes on base who could, expound on that, by however many numbers and score a lot of runs. You feel good about your offense, all that stuff. Your bullpen is maybe a little bit shaky, but that's okay because you're still scoring runs. And, your rotation may not have their best month, but again, that is also fine because you're scoring a lot of runs. Now that the offense has kind of come back down to earth a little bit, your Bobbies are still Bobbies, your Salvies are still your Salvies, but it feels like everybody else is having a more difficult time, getting on base and setting them up for that kind of extra base success. it does feel like you need to relearn how to win some of these games, right? Because it kind of comes a little bit easy. I'm not going to say playing baseball is easy, but it does feel, you feel a little bit better when you're like, oh yeah, we're scoring like 4 or 5 runs a game. Like the wins are going to be here, especially when you have a rotation that's super solid. But the fact that they're able to sort of figure out how to win low scoring games like that, where that hasn't really been like a guarantee, especially this month. But the fact that they've been able to do it, I gotta say, one more thought on a Sam Long here. The fact that he was able to get like the 1-2-3, like, you know, shutout, like no doubt about it, in the top of the 7th inning after the Royals got the go-ahead runs, where it felt like, oh man, this is usually the time where like maybe an untested like bullpen hand could go out there and see like the crackback from like the opposing team and really make it something. But the fact that he was able to like dead that immediately by getting the 1-2-3, I do feel like takes a lot of the stress off of the shoulders of the lineup, takes a lot of the stress off the shoulders of the bullpen in general, and it makes the task of, you know, closing down probably the best team in the AL right now a much more feasible task. And I do feel like having that mentality going over the next 3 games where you don't have to sweep them. It would be crazy. It would be awesome if you could sweep the Guardians. That'd be sick.
We'll start talking Central again if they sweep them, because they're still 8 back.
Yeah, you don't even need to like win the series.
Into it.
Yeah, you need to like win it. If you can get a split, that'd be crazy. But I feel like winning.
You don't want to win it? You won the first one.
I'd love to win it. But my point is, like, winning the game like this makes winning this series a lot more feasible in my mind.
Oh, yeah.
Because coming into this series, I was like, okay, if you can get a split out of here, I think we could call it good and we could just leave the month of June behind us and never have to think about it again. But if you get like a series win out of this, you're like, okay, it kind of feels like the Royals are putting their best foot forward again, like they have been and look for like April, like, you know, April, like March, May, all them. So it will feel like they're kind of getting back on schedule there to be like a serious threat for a wild card spot. And then again, I still think you're kind of fine if you end up splitting the series because, you know, it's a pretty good team, the Gardos.
I don't know. I'd like to think that if Andy were here, he would be ripping you for that take. But I'm going to say I understand because well, he's the must win against the Marlins, rah! And then he took away his Royals tattoo because they didn't sweep the Marlins. But anyway,
that would have been really
nice.
They
won that series.
I'm not going to lie to you.
I said in that series 2 out of 3 was enough. In this one, though, now that they've won the first game, like if we had done this yesterday, I would have said split it. I'm okay to split it and forget June ever happened. I think that's a good way to go about it. Now that they stole one, I'm kind of getting greedy. I want to see 3 of 4 for the Royals. And that doesn't mean suddenly the division is back in play. Like, they'll still be 7 back if they complete the 3 of 4. But you feel like, all right, 7 back is not 11 back, and it's not impossible that they would, over the course of a second half of the season, be able to make a charge. As of this moment, the Royals are in that 3rd wildcard spot. So they're half game up on Boston. Everybody's played a different amount of games, so the dust will settle eventually. And the cream will rise, but that's going to be kind of interesting to see how it unfolds. Royals, I'm calling it 3 of 4. I think they can get it done against the Guardians and show that they mean business.
That would be sick. We'll I'm thinking split here, but yeah, if they can try to cobble together another win like this throughout this series,
you really just want to get out of June, don't you? You're like, I just split
trying to get out of here, man. This is it.
Something about that calendar. I don't know what it is.
Just get to July. It'll be fine. You know, you get your All-Star break coming up, too. That'll be a much-needed reprieve. And they
play the Cardinals pretty soon.
They'll play the Cardinals.
July is going to be a 2-gamer against the Cardinals.
That'll be like a really good game. That'll be a really good series, rather.
That'll be fun. I never forget when the calendar starts to turn that I think it might have even been like a year ago, like June 30th last year or you know, around like the end of a month, where a reporter asked Paul Goldschmidt, hey, you know, you got your guys' record this month was whatever. You know, are you glad to be able to turn the calendar to, you know, the next month to June or turn it to July or whatever the case was? And he's like, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know what date it was, so I didn't know. Like, I don't really, like, he totally just doesn't, like, that's a very sports media narrative-y kind of thing. And Paul Goldschmidt's like, I don't know. I didn't know the date.
It's June?
I couldn't tell you.
Oh, interesting.
I just play baseball, bro. I don't know what to tell you. Like, and it's not, he doesn't like do it to be fake. That's really how he is. He's that locked in. He doesn't really care about other extraneous details, like, you know, the date. So that would never work at the top of the big show. If Paul Goldschmidt hosted the show, he would never be able to do what Andy does and what I am now doing for the next
well, it's hot. The days are longer, so it's maybe summer, I guess. I don't know. Hi, I'm Paul Goldschmidt. This is the big show.
This is the big show on KTGR. Now I have to get him to say, hey, Paul Goldschmidt, can you do one of those? This is the big show on KTGR, just because then we'll always have that inside joke. That might, but that of all the Cardinals that I could ask to do it, he would maybe not be the guy that I would bother to do it. But you never know. Maybe we'll get that someday. All right,